She was feared for her shape, until one human made her his home. The auction block. The auction platform creaked under Thora's weight as she stood with her head bowed, trying to appear smaller than her impressive 8-foot frame. Her purple skin, marked with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed with her emotions, betrayed her anxiety with bright flashes of indigo. Heavy chains bound her muscular wrists, designed specifically to restrain a Myraxian of her strength. Next up, a female Myraxian, strong back, stronger arms. The auctioneer, a thin Vesperian with translucent wings, circled her like a predator, perfect for heavy labor, construction, or security. Starting bid at 50 credits. The crowd of colonists remained silent. Some pointed, others whispered behind their hands. Thora had grown accustomed to these reactions. On her home planet, her height and muscular build would have earned her respect and status. Here in the Outer Rim colonies, she was merely a curiosity, or worse, a monster. 40 credits? 30? The auctioneer's voice grew desperate. Come now, she's worth at least 20. A child pointed at her and shrieked, She's scary, her skin is glowing. Thora closed her 4 eyes, the larger pair on her face and the smaller, set near her temples. The shame was worse than the hunger or the beatings. Her captors had paraded her through 3 different colony worlds, and on each the result was the same. Fear, mockery, rejection. 10 credits. Surely someone needs a strong back for 10 measly credits. Silence fell across the market square. The auctioneer sighed, preparing to move on. Fine, we'll return her to the holding. I'll take her. The voice was calm, steady, human. The crowd parted as a man stepped forward. He was tall for a human, but still nearly 2 feet shorter than Thora. His skin was dark brown, his head shaved smooth, and his eyes, a startling shade of amber, looked directly at Thora, not through her as others did. Darius Fletcher. Someone in the crowd murmured. The terraformer who lives beyond the ridge. The auctioneer blinked, in surprise. You want the Myraxian? For 10 credits? For 0 credits, Darius replied, his voice firm. Your transport ship is leaving in an hour. You don't want the expense of keeping her another night. The auctioneer sputtered, but Darius held his ground. Free her, or I'll report your operation to colonial authority. I doubt all your paperwork is in order. Minutes later, Thora found herself walking behind the human called Darius, her chains removed but her confusion mounting. The townsfolk stared as they passed, some making warding gestures against evil. Why? She finally asked, her deep voice rumbling like distant thunder. It was the first word she had spoken in weeks. Darius didn't turn around. No one deserves to be in chains. I could kill you, she said, not as a threat, but as a simple statement of fact. Her species was known for their strength. I could snap your spine with one hand. Now he stopped and turned to face her. Will you? Thora studied him, all 4 eyes, blinking in sequence. No. Then we have an understanding. He resumed walking. I have a homestead about 2 miles from here. It's not much, but there's a barn where you can stay if you wish, or you can leave. Your choice. Thora followed, her luminescent markings shifting from anxious indigo to a cautious yellow. For the first time since her capture, someone had given her a choice. As they crested the hill outside the settlement, Darius pointed to a modest dwelling nestled against a copse of alien trees. Home, he said simply, and though she didn't understand why, Thora felt something unfamiliar stir within, her chest the faintest glimmer of hope. Sanctuary among strangers, Darius's homestead sat at the edge of an artificial forest, trees imported from Earth that now grew alongside native flora in an uneasy coexistence. Much like its owner and his new companion, Thora ducked to enter the barn, her broad shoulders nearly touching both sides of the doorframe. Inside, farming equipment lined the walls, and a small loft area had been hastily converted with blankets and pillows. It's not much, Darius said, watching her examine the space. But it's dry and warm. Thora ran a 4-fingered hand along a wooden beam. Why help me? Darius leaned against the doorway. 3 years ago, my ship crashed on Balaxis Prime. A Myraxian trading vessel found me, nursed me back to health. They didn't have to help a human, but they did. He shrugged. I'm just returning the favor to your kind. Her bioluminescent markings pulsed with a soft blue glow, surprised Darius guessed, though he couldn't be sure. Rest, he said. There's a water pump outside, food in the cold storage unit. Help yourself. The next morning, Darius found his firewood pile had tripled in size. Each log was split with perfect precision. He smiled to himself. When he returned from his work that evening, assessing soil samples from the newly terraformed Eastern Valley, he found Thora repairing the fence that bordered his property. Her massive hands designed for strength worked with surprising delicacy on the wooden posts. You didn't have to do that, he said. I ate your food, she replied simply. I repay debts. Days passed this way. Thora worked tirelessly around the homestead, fixing, building, improving. Darius would find tasks completed before he could even mention them. The barn roof, leaking for months, was suddenly watertight. The irrigation system, once temperamental, now functioned flawlessly, but when Darius invited her to eat at his table, she hesitated. Your neighbors already talk, she said. They fear me. Indeed, word had spread through the colony. Twice already, local officials had visited, asking pointed questions about the dangerous alien Darius harbored. Children sometimes gathered at the edge of his property, daring each other to get closer to catch a glimpse of the monster. Let them talk, Darius said, setting 2 plates on the table. I've never much cared for gossip. That evening, they shared their first meal together. Thora sat awkwardly on a reinforced chair Darius had built specially, her knees nearly touching her chest at the human-sized table. On Myrax, she said between careful bites, we eat communally. Sharing food means sharing trust. Darius nodded. Similar concept on Earth. She studied him with all 4 eyes. The small ones at my temple see heat signatures, she explained, noticing his curiosity. Your body temperature increases when you speak of Earth. You miss it. Sometimes, he admitted. But Earth is crowded, polluted. Out here, there's space to breathe. A commotion outside interrupted their meal. Voices, angry and loud, approached the house. Thora stiffened, her markings flashing warning red. Darius opened the door to find 5 colonists on his porch, led by the settlement's head of security, a stocky woman named Warden Preston. Fletcher, Preston said tersely, there are concerns about your guest. What concerns? Darius asked, blocking the doorway. 3 children claim they saw her hunting in the western woods, acting aggressive. I've been home all day, Thora said from behind Darius, her deep voice causing several colonists to step back. She hasn't left the property, Darius confirmed. Preston's eyes narrowed. The colony charter prohibits unregistered aliens from... She's registered, Darius interrupted. As my employee, filed the paperwork yesterday. This was news to Thora, whose markings swirled with confusion. After more tense words, the group reluctantly departed, but their suspicious glances lingered. Why did you lie? Thora asked when they were alone. It wasn't entirely a lie, Darius replied. I did file the paperwork. You've more than earned your keep. He hesitated. Unless you'd rather leave? Thora looked around at the small house, at the repaired furniture built to accommodate her size, at the human who looked at her without fear. No, she said finally, her markings settling into a calm lavender. I would not rather leave. Unfamiliar feelings. The first rainfall of the season transformed the landscape around Darius's homestead. Native purple flowers erupted overnight, their bell-shaped blooms releasing a scent like cinnamon and sea salt. Thora stood in the doorway of the barn, watching the downpour with all 4 eyes wide open. The rain on Myrax is acidic, she explained when Darius joined her. We cannot stand in it like this. Without hesitation, she extended her massive hand into the torrent, letting droplets collect in her palm. Her bioluminescent markings pulsed with gentle turquoise waves, joy Darius had learned over the past weeks. There are many simple pleasures here, Darius said. things I took for granted until I saw them through your eyes. Thora looked down at him, her upper eyes meeting his gaze while her temple eyes tracked the heat patterns of his body. Your temperature rises when you look at me now. Not from fear. Darius felt warmth creep into his cheeks. I'm not afraid of you, Thora. I never was. That evening, they sat on the porch as the rain continued. Darius had constructed a bench strong enough to support Thora's weight, and they shared a bottle of fermented berry wine from his small vineyard. Does my size truly not disturb you? She asked suddenly. On my world I am considered moderate. Here I am monstrous. Darius considered her question carefully. Different doesn't mean monstrous. Your strength isn't something to fear, it's something to admire. Her markings flickered with an intensity he hadn't seen before, shifting through colors too quickly. To interpret, on my racks, she said softly. We communicate not just with words but with light and touch. She hesitated. May I show you? When Darius nodded, she slowly extended her hand. Her fingers were twice the size of his, the skin textured like smooth leather. With incredible gentleness, she placed her palm against his. Immediately, her bioluminescent markings began to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. Waves of color, deep purples, vibrant blues, and a rose gold he'd never seen from her before, flowed from her palm up her arm and across her body. This is how we share emotions, she explained, her voice lower than usual. What you see, these are my feelings for you. Darius stared, transfixed by the display. It's beautiful, he whispered. What does the rose gold mean? It has no translation in your language, she replied. The closest would be belonging with another. The rain drummed on the roof as understanding dawned in Darius's eyes. Without words, he interlaced his fingers with hers, marveling at how something so powerful could be so gentle. A crack of thunder broke the moment. Thora withdrew her hand, her markings settling into a steady violet glow. I should not have done that, she said. Your kind and mine. It is not done. Says who? Darius challenged softly. Before she could answer, a flash of light illuminated the sky, followed by shouts from the direction of the colony. They both stood, seeing flames in the distance. Lightning had struck the colony's grain silo. They'll need help, Darius said, already moving toward his rover. Thora followed without hesitation. When they arrived at the colony, chaos reigned. The fire was spreading from the silo to nearby structures, and colonists formed a bucket chain, desperately trying to contain the blaze. Warden Preston spotted them first. Fletcher, get that creature away from here, we don't need more problems. But Darius ignored her. Thora can help. Without waiting for permission, Thora strode toward the burning silo. The heat was intense, but her Miraxian physiology could withstand temperatures that would scorch human skin. She began tearing away burning sections of the structure, creating a fire break to prevent the spread. Some colonists stopped to stare in fear or awe, but others continued their work, grudgingly accepting the assistance. A support beam from the silo collapsed, nearly crushing 2 colonists, but Thora caught it with one hand, holding the massive timber aloft while they scrambled to safety. Hours later, exhausted and soot-covered, Thora and Darius returned home. The fire had been contained, though not before destroying the silo and damaging several buildings. No lives had been lost, thanks in part to Thora's intervention. They still fear me, she said as they washed away the ash and smoke. Fear often precedes understanding, Darius replied. But some of them saw you differently tonight. It's a start. As the adrenaline of the night faded, they found themselves standing close together in the dim light of the kitchen. Darius reached up, his hand hovering near her face. May I? He asked. When she nodded, he traced the luminescent markings on her cheek, watching them brighten at his touch. The rose gold color returned, more intense than before. Belonging with another, he repeated her words from earlier. I think I understand now. Her 4 eyes blinked in unison, a sign of deep emotion among her people. This path is unknown to me, she admitted. To both of us, Darius said. But I'd like to explore it. Together. The colony's peril. The following weeks brought gradual changes to Thora's life at the homestead. Darius had expanded her living space, transforming half the barn into proper quarters, with furniture built to her scale. More significant than these physical changes, however, was the evolution of their relationship. Each evening, they shared what Darius called cultural exchanges. Thora taught him Myraxian meditation techniques that utilized bioluminescence to calm the mind. In return, he introduced her to earth music, delighting in how her markings pulsed in rhythm with the melodies. Their moments of physical connection remained cautious but increasingly frequent. Hands touching, shoulders brushing, and once Darius placing his palm against the center of her chest where her markings were brightest, feeling the double beat of her twin hearts. In Myraxian culture, she'd explained, allowing someone to touch your lifelights is an act of profound trust. The colony, however, remained divided in its reception of Thora. Some residents, like the young botanist Juno Wells, had begun to approach her with curious questions rather than fear. Others, led by Warden Preston, maintained their suspicion. One morning, unusual stillness hung in the air. Thora emerged from her quarters to find Darius studying his atmospheric monitors with concern. "Pressure's dropping rapidly," he said without looking up. "And there's an electromagnetic disturbance growing to the west." "Storm?" she asked, joining him. "Worse. I think it's an ion cyclone." His face was grim. "They're rare on terraformed worlds, but devastating when they hit." Within hours, the sky turned an ominous green-black. Colony emergency sirens began to wail as winds picked up, carrying debris and generating static electricity that made the air crackle. Darius's communicator chirped with an emergency broadcast. "Attention all colonists, take shelter immediately. Ion cyclone approaching from the western quadrant. Underground shelters are opening now, this is not a drill." "We need to go," Darius said, gathering emergency supplies. Thora hesitated. "The colony shelters are not built for my kind." "You'll fit," he insisted, "and if anyone objects, they can take it up with me." When they arrived at the colony center, evacuation was already underway. Families hurried toward the underground bunkers built into the hillside. The winds had intensified, tearing at clothing, and making communication difficult. Warden Preston stood at the entrance to the main shelter, directing traffic. Her eyes narrowed when she spotted Thora. "The shelters are at capacity," she shouted over the wind. "For colonists only." Darius stepped forward. "She's with me. She's earned her place." "It's physically impossible," Preston insisted. "Look at her size. We barely have room for our own people." Before Darius could argue further, a terrified shout cut through the chaos. A young woman was pointing toward the colony's water processing plant, where the roof had partially collapsed. "My daughter's still inside. She was helping with maintenance." Without hesitation, Thora turned from the shelter and began moving against the crowd, toward the damaged building. "Thora," Darius called after her, "the cyclone is almost here." She paused only long enough to look back at him, all four eyes blinking in sequence, the Myraxian gesture of resolve. "I cannot fit in your shelter, I can help here." The wind was so strong now that it pushed against even Thora's massive frame. Electrical discharges from the approaching storm created blue-white forks across the sky, striking dangerously close to the colony buildings. When she reached the water plant, parts of the structure were already crumbling. She forced her way through the main doors, ducking to avoid the hanging debris. "Is anyone here?" Her deep voice echoed through the facility. A faint cry answered from below. Following the sound, she found a girl of perhaps 12 standard years, trapped beneath fallen machinery. The child's eyes widened in terror when she saw Thora. "I won't hurt you," Thora said, kneeling beside her. "I'm here to help." The girl's fear turned to wonder as Thora's markings shifted to a calming blue, illuminating the darkened space. With careful movements, Thora lifted the machinery, a task that would have required several humans, and freed the child. "Can you walk?" Thora asked, but the girl shook her head, pointing to her injured leg. Outside, the ion cyclone was nearly upon them. The air smelled of ozone and electricity, and the building groaned under the assault of the winds. Thora made a quick decision. Cradling the child against her chest, she positioned herself in a corner of the building where two load-bearing walls met. As the roof began to tear away, she curled her massive body around the girl, creating a living shield. "What's your name?" Thora asked, trying to distract the child from the terrifying sounds of destruction around them. "Ellie," the girl whispered, clinging to Thora. "Are we going to die?" "No," Thora said firmly, her markings glowing steady violet, the color of protection. "My body is much stronger than your human buildings. We will wait out the storm together." For what felt like hours, Thora remained hunched over Ellie as the cyclone tore through the colony. Debris struck her back and shoulders, drawing purple blood. But she never shifted her position. The child eventually fell asleep, exhausted by fear, while Thora maintained her vigil. When the storm finally passed, leaving eerie silence in its wake, Thora emerged from the ruins of the water plant, with Ellie still held protectively in her arms. The colony was devastated. Buildings flattened, equipment scattered, the landscape transformed. As survivors began emerging from the shelters, Ellie's mother ran forward with a cry of relief. Thora gently transferred the child to her and watched as they embraced. Then she became aware of the colonists gathering around her, staring not with fear, but with something new in their eyes. A new beginning dawn broke over a changed landscape. The ion cyclone had carved a path of destruction through the colony, leaving half the structures damaged or destroyed. As sunlight illuminated the aftermath, colonists emerged from shelters to assess the damage and begin the work of rebuilding. Thora stood apart from the crowd, her massive frame battered and bruised from her night shielding Ellie. Purple blood had dried on her shoulders where debris had struck her, and exhaustion weighed on her like gravity. Still, she worked alongside the humans, lifting fallen beams and clearing rubble with her unmatched strength. She noticed the change immediately. Colonists who had once crossed to the other side of pathways to avoid her now worked beside her, passing her tools, offering water. No one flinched when her four eyes turned their way. "Miss Thora," a small voice called. Ellie limped toward her, leg bandaged but spirits high. "My mom wants to know if you'll join us for dinner tonight. When we have a kitchen again, I mean." Before Thora could respond, Warden Preston approached. The security chief's uniform was torn and dirty, her face scratched, but her back remained straight as ever. "Myraxian," she said formally, then corrected herself. "Thora, the council has convened an emergency session. Your presence is requested." Darius, who had been helping restore power to the medical center, joined them with concern on his face. "What's this about, Preston?" "It's not what you think, Fletcher," Preston replied, something almost like respect in her voice. "Just come." The colony's council chamber had survived the storm relatively intact. Inside, the 7 council members sat at their table, while other colonists crowded the space. Whispers followed Thora as she entered, but they weren't fearful. They were reverent. Chief Counselor Hewitt, an older man with silver hair and weathered skin, stood as they approached. "Thora of Myrax," he began, using her full designation for the first time. "This council has gathered to formally acknowledge your actions during yesterday's disaster." He gestured to Ellie and her mother in the front row. "You risked your life to save one of our children when you could have sought safety for yourself." "There was no shelter that would fit me," Thora said simply, her markings pulsing a modest blue. "I did what anyone would do." "But that's just it," Hewitt continued. "Not anyone could have done what you did. Your strength, your unique physiology, the very thing some of us feared, are what saved lives yesterday." Warden Preston stepped forward. "I've compiled reports from throughout the colony. At least 14 structures remained standing because of emergency supports you installed over the past months. Supports that were stronger than our standard protocols required." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. "Furthermore," Hewitt added, Our meteorological team believes this settlement would have been completely destroyed without the windbreak of terraformed trees you and Darius planted along the western ridge. Thora glanced at Darius, who smiled quietly. They had spent weeks planting those trees, a project he had insisted would benefit from her strength and reach. The colony charter, Hewitt continued, allows for the granting of full citizenship to non-humans who have demonstrated extraordinary commitment to our community's welfare. He looked around the room. The council has voted unanimously to offer you citizenship, Thora of Myrax, not as a laborer or refugee, but as an equal member of this colony. Shocked silence filled Thora's mind. On her palm, the citizenship emblem would be permanent, a recognition she had never expected to receive on any human world. She began, then stopped, overwhelmed. Her markings cascaded through colors, broadcasting emotions too complex for words. Darius stepped closer, his hand finding hers. "You belong here," he said softly, "if you want to." Looking down at him, this human who had seen her worth when no one else would, Thora felt her twin hearts beating in a synchronized rhythm she'd never experienced before. "Yes," she said finally, her voice steady despite the emotion surging through her. "I accept." The ceremony was brief but meaningful. As the colony's medical officer applied the citizenship mark to Thora's palm, cheers erupted through the chamber. Ellie pushed forward to hug Thora's leg, while other colonists approached with words of gratitude and welcome. Later, as dusk fell, over the damaged but enduring settlement, Thora and Darius walked hand in hand along the ridge overlooking the colony. Repair work continued below, lights beginning to flicker on as power was restored sector by sector. "When you bought my freedom," Thora said, "I thought you were either foolish or wanted to use me. I never imagined—" She gestured toward the colony, then to the space between them. "That you'd find a home?" Darius finished. "Or that we'd find each other?" "Both," she admitted. Her markings had settled into the rose-gold glow that appeared only when she was with him. On Myrax we have a saying, "Different stars form the same constellations." It means that things that seem incompatible can create something beautiful together, Darius translated. "We have similar sayings on Earth." He reached up, tracing the luminescent patterns on her arm that now pulsed in time with his touch. Where once she had flinched from contact, now she leaned into it, her massive frame gentle and responsive. "I have lived among 7 species across 12 worlds," Thora said, her 4 eyes fixed on the horizon. "Yet only here, with you, have I stopped feeling too large for the universe." Darius smiled. "Perhaps the universe was just waiting for you, to find the right place to fit." As night fell completely, Thora's bioluminescence painted them both in soft light. In the colony below, reconstruction continued, a community being rebuilt stronger than before, with space for differences, with room to grow. Thora knelt to bring herself closer to Darius's height. With infinite care, she cradled his face in her hands, her markings blazing brighter than ever before. "On Myrax," she said softly, "this is how we seal a bond of belonging." When their foreheads touched, Darius felt a gentle warmth spread through him, as if her light had found a way inside him. Different stars, same constellation. Together they watched the first new buildings rise from the rubble of the old, symbols of resilience in a world that had finally recognized that strength comes in many forms, and that fear dissolves in the face of understanding. And in that moment, Thora, once feared for her difference, found herself not just accepted, but cherished for the very things that made her unique.